Hello, this is James Barkell.
And it is wonderful to have your company here on the centre court.
You are listening to the Coach Doctor podcast.
Strikes it beautifully and it's down the middle.
In this podcast series, we discuss all things coaching and sports science.
Beats one, beats a couple, still going.
Each episode will feature prominent coaches on the front line of their sport.
Across to Mbappe.
As well as some of the world's leading university academics who research what it takes to get the W.
All Blacks under big pressure again.
If there is an aspect of your coaching that needs some assistance, you can always count on the Coach Doctor to add life to your program.
Browning's having a terrific run. The first three to qualify. You betcha!
In this episode, I speak to Brian Ashton, the former coach of Bath Rugby Club and the England Rugby Union team, and now a very much renowned figure in coach education. Brian discusses his initial introduction to rugby and his transformation from an autocratic coach in his early days as a strict school teacher into a democratic, player-centred coach. Without sounding rude, Brian has years of experience coaching at many levels in rugby union, and since retiring from professional rugby, is involved in coach education and coach consultancy in many sports, including netball and football, where he spent time with multiple Premier League clubs. Brian was immensely giving of his time, and we spoke for almost 2 hours, so I'll present this podcast in 2 episodes. I hope you enjoy part 1 with Brian Ashton. Hey, hello Brian.
Hi, how you doing?
Yeah, good mate. How have you been?
Yeah, sort of battling through like the rest of the world, I think, over the past, it's nearly 2 years now, isn't it?
Yeah, 2 years coming up to 3 if I'm correct. But hey, let's talk about some rugby and some coaching, 2 of your biggest passions. I've got a heap of questions. And
right, yeah, let's just fire away and see where it takes us.
Yeah, what I thought is, some of them you'll probably answer 2 or 3 in one sort of question. So I thought we'd get started, Brian, if you were able to just tell me a little bit about how you got involved in rugby in the first place.
Well, I was born in a town in South Lancashire in the northwest of England, a place called Lee, which is just outside Wigan. And it's very much a rugby league area, that. And my father played rugby league in a semi-professional way, but his career was interrupted by World War II. So when he came back from fighting in World War II, then he was too old to play. So I was brought up, played rugby league as a kid, then won a scholarship to a grammar school, actually 400 yards from where I'm sitting now.
Yeah, wow.
In the north part of Lancaster, I was a boarder there. And they only played Union, so obviously I switched from league to Union, although I used to play league when I went home in the holidays, because all my mates had no idea what Union was.
Yeah.
And they thought it was a silly game anyway, because they said if we want to play a game where it's all about kicking, we'll play football. So, because in those days, Union was about kicking.
Yeah.
So that's how I got into Union. And then I played for a local club and I left school and got, I suppose, talent ID'd in a sevens tournament and went to play for a club called Bath Rugby Club. I mean, the most famous player came from there, Bill Beaumont, who's chairman of World Rugby, one of my best mates. Yeah. And in those days, it was probably in the top 25 clubs in the country. It's not now, for a whole variety of reasons. So played at a really good level with some top players, 2 or 3 international players were in the side. And eventually played some representative rugby and then came on tour to Australia in 1975 with England. And then sort of after that, I was 29 then. So I think if I was going to play at all for England, I was playing my best rugby 3 years before that.
Yeah.
And I knew I wasn't going to there's going to be no longevity in playing for England, even though I've been on tour.
Yeah.
So I got the opportunity to go and play abroad.
Yeah.
So I played for 2 years in France and 3 years in Italy. In the days when not many people did that. So I was a sort of forerunner of people like Campo and whatnot.
Was it still amateur over there at that stage, or was it, paid him under the table or something like that?
Theoretically, it was amateur.
Yeah.
But I mean, I played my first year in Italy in Rome, got a flat in a car and enough money to keep me alive. That's keep myself, my wife and my daughter alive. Yeah. And then went to Milan for 2 years as player coach and similar sort of thing. So I suppose in some ways it was against the laws of the international game, but here I am.
Yeah.
Never been holed up in front of the guys. I mean,
it's all right. It's all okay as long as you don't get caught.
Given that my best mate is chairman of World Rugby, I'm hoping that'll never happen.
We'll have to have a little chat to him and make sure that Australia gets the World Cup in 2027, mate.
Yeah.
Brian, so you sort of led, I guess, through your playing career. When you went to Italy, you mentioned your last couple of years were at Milan. You were a player coach. So was that the start of your coaching career there?
It was the start of my club coaching career. Obviously, I started teaching in 1969. So until rugby went professional in 96, if you subtract the 5 years I played rugby abroad, I taught for just over 20 years.
Yeah.
And so 1969, I started teaching. And inevitably, because I was playing rugby pretty close to test match level then anyway, then I did some coaching at the school where I was at. So I suppose teaching / coaching began in 1969.
Yeah, okay. And that was coaching at schoolboy level initially, or?
Yeah, schoolboy level. I started with an under-12s team.
Yeah.
And coached them incredibly badly because I coached them to play the game as I was playing it at the time. I was saying I was playing pretty close to test match level.
Yeah.
Both these guys had never played the game at all before.
Yeah.
So surprise, we had very little success and they had very little enjoyment.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about that, I guess, those early days of coaching and until, I mean, you coached all the way up to English, the national team. Tell me a little bit how you transformed over those years from, those initial days where you're coaching under 12s, like you were like they were test match players, all the way through to, that national level.
Yeah. So I think in 1969, the sort of teaching / coaching environment, coaching in rugby really hadn't kicked off in this part of the world in 69. Then in the teaching world, which is the closest equivalent to it, it was very much a sort of the teacher is in charge environment, almost command control. And so I sort of, despite the fact that I lived my life as a bit of a rebel, I got expelled from the grammar school to which I won a scholarship, which is, looking back, is a bit of a badge of honour. And I say in the school's just down the road, so I pop in from time to time just to remind them I'm still around. But it was, and I actually played my rugby in a rebellious way too, because I was about 5'6" and 11 stone.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is in kilos and this, that, and the other, because I know don't deal in stuff like that. And there's some big lads knocking around in my day, some big 18 stone, 6'6" forwards.
Yeah.
So I had to be pretty smart and different in terms of just staying out of trouble. Never mind playing the game. So my coaching and teaching was completely opposed to the way I led my life and the way that I played my game. So I was very much command control. And I think it was driven by three things. Number one was ego. All coaches have egos, otherwise they wouldn't do the job. And maybe I suffer from small man syndrome and had a bigger ego than some. So I like to be in control and charge of what went on. The second, I've already indicated, was the environment that we were in. It was expected that the teacher was in control of the class, and the class was very quiet and just sit and listen, and they would learn and pass exams. I taught history in the classroom and coached games outside. But I think the most significant one, and I think this is still apparent in the world today of coaching, is the fear element. The fear, especially with young coaches, of not being in control, of a session not seem to be going smoothly. So it's the fear of A, not being in control, B, what are your peer coaches thinking of it? If it looks a little bit chaotic, they sort of might be thinking, does this guy really know what he's doing? The fear, the expectation of the players. So if you're coaching at club level or a professional game, are you coaching players who've come from an environment where they have always been told what they need to do? So their expectations that you will tell them what to do. And if you don't, if you ask them questions, instead of telling them things, they might be thinking the same thing. Does this guy really know, what he's involved in, what he's talking about? And the fourth one is, and this, I suppose this is more, well, maybe, I don't know whether it's certainly might be in teaching as well in schools, but certainly in the professional game, I suppose there may well be a fear of upsetting the employer. Other employers' expectations of how you should deliver and behave and be seen to behave by, people outside the environment. And it's quite sad that, I think, in professional coaching, because my experience has been that the majority of people who do employ you know very little about the game, but they're the guys who make the big decisions about whether you stay, whether you go. So there's a bit of an anomaly in professional coaching. I suppose it's the same in all sports, that.
I'd say so.
The wealthy owners that buy clubs and run organisations, for them it's either it's a bit of a toy, really, in many ways, but actually they know nothing about it, but they like to pontificate about it as though they know everything. And ultimately they make the decision. So yeah, I suppose that for me, that fear element is a real sort of inhibiting factor in how a lot of people coach.
Yeah, and then you mentioned the word chaotic, and if we think about the game is a very chaotic game in the sense that away from set piece, there's no real form that you can't identify what one team is going to do phase after phase. It's just a guessing game that whether they kick, whether the attack or the defense is completely unstructured. So you're playing a really chaotic environment. So how did you then transition from that really, I guess, structured autocratic style of coach to, I guess, your later years of coaching?
Right. Well, to be honest, I was incredibly lucky. That's how it happened.
Yeah.
So when I went to play in France, I played a team that's now called Clermont-Auvergne. It was then Ice Montferrand in Clermont-Ferrand. And I think one of the early games we played was against Stade Toulouse. And I played in a game of rugby I'd never even seen before, because these guys, Stade Toulouse, spent the whole of the game trying to avoid contact and stay on their feet. Now, I mean, that will be unbelievable unusual in the modern game, never mind, this is 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And after the game, I thought, wow, this is really interesting. So I went to find out who the coach was, because I've always been pretty inquisitive. And it was a guy called Pierre Villepreux, who was a former French fullback. And I think he was probably, certainly in the Northern Hemisphere, he's the first genuine counter-attacking fullback in the Northern Hemisphere. So he had this element of ambition and being different about him anyway. And I just talked to him, and we got on well. And then coincidentally, when I went to Italy 2 years later, he was appointed the technical director of the Italian Rugby Federation. So I actually spent quite a bit of time with him over the next 3 years in Italy. And also in Italy at the time was a coach called Carwyn James, who, if there are any older people my age watching this, then they'll remember him as being the British Lions coach. He's the only British Lions coach to ever win a test series in New Zealand.
Okay.
And he regarded himself, he was a university lecturer, very, very intelligent man. He regarded himself as a facilitator, not a coach, and which was the reason why he never got the Welsh job, because they didn't like the word facilitator, so they never appointed him. But he was in Italy at the same time as well, coaching a team called Rovigo. So they had these two, looking back now, superstars of the international coaching world. And here's me, this little guy still playing, but sort of making his way in the coaching world, had the opportunity on more than one occasion to sit down and listen to them. I obviously couldn't contribute much because they were talking about things that just made my eyes pop out, just about the approach to coaching. And it was very much, driven by Villepreux, but James was very much the same. It was all about the players. It was all about problem solving. It was all about decision making. It was all about opposed practices. It was all about the game reality of practices. Neither of them were big fans of drills. Neither of them were big fans of systems, structures. They're just, I suppose the best way to describe their overall approach to the game would be to develop a framework in which to play. And within that framework, then players, through session design during the week, were given the tools, resources and opportunities to solve the variety of problems and make the good decisions when they were required.
Yeah.
So it moved me mentally from the authoritarian coach that you so aptly described a minute or two ago to a far more player engaged and player centered approach. Because, you know, common sense tells you ultimately they're the guys that play the game. They're in the firing line from first whistle to final whistle.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess would this been the first time you were exposed to like a game sense style of coaching? Did you play a lot more games and stuff in practice?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So that didn't though preclude improving the technical side of the game and the physical side of the game, obviously. And you can design sessions whereby the focus might be on a particular technical aspect, i.e. the tackle area or something like that, and physical conditioning. So you play 5 minutes non-stop, so the ball doesn't go out of play, and you design a session, a transition game, such as that. But by and large, it was games-based. And I know Veal Pro controversially said, and I think he still believes that you improve your technique and you improve your skill by playing games. You find a way for your technique and skill to fit in the way that the team wants to play. Now, that's pretty controversial, that. And I'm not all that sure that I agree with that one fully.
Okay.
So the evening games-based training, there is a place, I think, to do some specific technical work with individual players. But the one thing I don't believe in is doing drills where it's sort of one cap fits all, where everybody does the same drill. Because my experience has been with that one, I look back at my early teaching career, I'm thinking, Jesus, I must have put on some drills where 90% of the players could actually do the thing I was asking them to do. And it was only the 10% that couldn't, and that's why I'd done the drill.
Yeah.
Thinking the 90% must have been thinking, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
So we can already do it.
They could already do it, and the other 10% who couldn't, but they probably not getting that much out of it themselves because they were seeing the other 90% doing it fine. And
absolutely, yeah. And I look back and think, gee, how much time must I have wasted for some of those players just doing things they could already do? And actually, when I was coaching at Bath, I don't want to jump ahead too far, but when I was coaching at Bath in the 1990s, and it was still the amateur game, but Bath were incredibly successful. We won a whole series of league and cups during the decade. And one of our players, a guy called Jeremy Guscott, who's pretty famous, sent to play for England, British Lions. He'd been out on the 89 tour to Australia, I think, his first Lions tour. And he came to me one night, and after a session, because we only trained 2 nights a week in the amateur days, he said, no, in fact, the whole squad was around, so you sort of have your gathering at the end of the session. And I think at that time, there were 18, 19 international players in the first team squad. And he said, well, thanks for that, Brian. He said, what we've done tonight, he said, I could have planned in 2 minutes on the back of a fag paper. He said, stop wasting my time. We did this session 2 weeks ago. We did it really well. Is that all you can come up with in the 48 hours you've been thinking about the session, and walked off? And I'm stood there, and all the other players are sort of looking at the ground thinking, Jesus, we just heard that. What's he going to say? And I didn't know what to say, so I just went, right, lads, thanks. See you next session, whatever. The good thing for me was I had a 30-minute drive home.
Yeah.
So I had time to reflect on what he'd said.
Yeah.
And by the time I got home, I thought, geez, he's absolutely right. He's spot on. So I phoned him up when I got back, and he said, I'm sort of half apologetic. I said, well, you don't need to be, because you're right. And I need to change the way I operate. So I had a good chat with him about it. That helped me too to develop the sort of element of challenge and disruption in sessions.
Yeah.
So to make sessions difficult so that players had to solve issues during the sessions. And it took my coaching, I think, to a different level.
Yeah, that's
the good news at the end of it all was when I got married to Helen, Jerry Guscott was our best man.
Oh, fantastic.
So we obviously didn't fall out too much.
No, that's good. I hope he didn't give you too much advice before your wedding, mate.
No, he didn't. No.
A lot of coaches wouldn't be very open to that level of criticism in front of the playing group. Was there a part of you initially that wanted to defend your session and put him in his place? And if so, was this only short-lived, and did you encourage feedback to reflect on your coaching?
Yeah, I think I probably got to this stage. This was about 1990, I think. This was 1991. And my transformation that we talked about earlier with the likes of Veal Pro and Carwyn James had been between 77 and 82, 83. So I was already on the track of sort of more player-centered approach, etc. So I was pretty chilled and cool with players challenging me. It was an expectation that if I challenged them, then we developed. I think the environment is a caring but demanding one. But the expectation there is that challenges allowed both ways.
Yeah.
Before we come to a solution. Not sure that that's all that prevalent around the world these days, to be honest. But it's certainly a bit unusual in the 90s. So yeah. I was pretty cool with it. And as I said, I had the time to reflect on it and realise that maybe I ought to do something about this.
Yeah, and you'd encourage that culture of, you know, the players being able to challenge the coach if the coach can challenge the players. Yeah. Yeah,
I think, you know, you do it in a sympathetic manner.
Yeah.
It's a positive challenge. It's not a destructive and objectionable challenge.
Yeah.
Because that serves no purpose whatsoever. So yeah.
Yeah.
Sympathetic with challenging environment. So when I think, you know, when I met you in Australia a couple of years ago, I've got a feeling that John Eales talked about that with, who is it? Was it Rob McQueen, the coach? I can't remember. May have been Rob McQueen, the coach. So they developed something similar to that, which was unusual at the time.
Yeah.
Where players could challenge coaches, but in a sympathetic and positive manner. Yeah.
Yeah. Brian, one of the questions I wanted to ask you, and I guess goes back to that time I met you in Australia, was one of the things you're quite strong on was developing a coaching philosophy. What do you firstly mean by a coaching philosophy? Is it about a game plan? Is it about a playing style? Or is it something about the way you coach? Or is it something completely different?
It's definitely not about a game plan. That's for sure. I don't believe in game plans. Because I said earlier, I believe in operating within a framework of play. As opposed to a game plan to me can be, not always, but more often than not, it's fairly regimented. It's systemized, it's structured. Players tend to, in a game plan, play towards a system instead of play the game. If you see the difference, then instead of playing what's going on around them, what they're seeing, or what they're feeling, or what they're thinking, or what they're hearing, they just play the system. Right, we're going to play 2-1, so we're going first ruck here, same way. Then we're going to switch back, and you think, well, what about the defence? Well, what are they doing at the time? You know, so it depends. The way you play the game with the ball is a lot of it is dependent on how the opposition are defending. So, yeah, I think my overall sort of coaching philosophy is, and again, this has been developed, but that transformational period with those guys that I mentioned before, and incidentally, I'm going to include Wayne Smith in that group. Because I think those three, Vilpra, Smith and Carwyn James, are the three greatest coaches that I've ever engaged with. Is a quite simple one. My dream is just change the way the game's played. End of story.
Yeah.
That is a pretty simple sentence, but it's one hell of a challenge. But it's something to aspire to. Whether it's achievable for a single coach or not is debatable, but I like to think sort of had an impact on the game in a now and again that's made people look at the game and think, well, we can play the game differently.
Yeah.
I can give it a couple of examples if you like.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so at schoolboy level, I had a team and it was their choice initially, but I went along with it. They played a whole season without kicking the ball once. And people say to you, well, you can't play rugby like that. The laws of the game are not designed to allow you to play like that, but they did it and won 12 out of 13. And in fact, the game they lost at the end of the term was against an Australian touring team, Southport, the team from Southport.
Yeah, Southport, the Southport school up on the Gold Coast.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
Matt Rogers from there. There's been quite a few Wallabies from that school.
well, the weird thing was where we played these games, we won 12 out of 12 against English opposition. The Aussie guys coming over, and it was December, so it was the end of term for us. And it snowed on the day. And I said, coming from the Gold Coast, these guys have never seen snow. I said, so we just carry on playing as well. And Jesus, they outplayed us. They hardly kicked the ball at all. We completely outplayed us. So fair play to them.
Yeah.
But, yeah. So that was that. And then there were a couple of things. I remember when I was coaching England under Clive Woodward and the side that won the 2003 World Cup, we sort of played, and part of this came from my rugby league background. We developed a game that played right across the width of the field because that was unusual at the time. So that obviously had a massive impact on the skill set of the forwards if they were going to participate in that.
Yeah.
And also we developed, because we had Johnny Wilkinson playing at 10, and the kicking to score game. Again, a lot of that came from rugby league as well, because they were, probably still are, light years ahead of Rugby Union in terms of how they kick to score. But we developed this kicking to score from our own 22 as well, which you now see. Bowden Barrett's a bit of an exponent of that, I think, for New Zealand. Maybe, I don't know if Quade Cooper is or not, possibly. He's probably got the mindset to do it, that's for sure. Things like that, because I've always been a curious coach, things like that have always really inspired me to do something the opposition not expecting.
Going on that theme, you talked about being able to change the game. Where do you see the game going in the next 10 to 15 years?
Oh, wow. Yeah, good question, that. I think as ever at the moment, in the professional game, it's probably partly directed by the changes in the laws, which really pisses me off, because I think, coaches and players, the people who are directly involved in the game, should actually be, whether responsible is not the right word, but maybe it is, responsible for changing the way the game's played, and not the people up at the top end of the game deciding, well, we need to change this, we need to change that law to make, the imaginative coaches can change the game. Imaginative players, given the opportunities, can change the way the game's played. But we go back to this fear thing. Is there too much at stake? If we do things that are different, we do things that have got a risk element to it, what's the impact going to be if it doesn't work? So I think that holds back change. There are teams around the world who, I suppose this might not be what you want to hear, but the All Blacks, the All Blacks over the past few years, have been, they created a bit of a gap between them and the rest of the world about the way they played the game. They play what I call opportunistic rugby. They see an opportunity, they seize it and go for it. And they could be, 90 metres out from their own line. So yeah, this opportunistic approach to the game, I think is important. And that's part of sort of changing the way the game's played. If suddenly you create a 4-on-2, 5 metres from your own line, why wouldn't you go for it? The only reason you wouldn't is the element of fear, which is probably instilled by the coach. It's not, but it soon filters through to the players. The second thing is, have we got the legs to do it? So there's a conditioning element to it. And the third thing is, have we got the skills to execute it? Well, if you're talking at the top end of the game, if you can't execute a 4-on-2, with all the best will, what the hell are you doing on the field? Doesn't matter what number on your back. So, but I think, that fear element does hold it back.
Yeah. I guess one of the things I've noticed over the autumn series that has just been played over your way, there's been a bit of a hybrid of, I guess, the Northern Hemisphere teams being fairly dominant. And I've noticed they've got a bit of a hybrid of that traditional Northern Hemisphere, really strong at set piece, big, strong forwards, but they've also now starting to develop a lot of speed with some of those big forward power runners out in the back, the wider channels, working with the back line, and the back line's hands have really, really improved. Do you think that's partly to do with the number of Southern Hemisphere players that are applying their trade in Europe now, and also some of the coaches that have come up from the Southern Hemisphere to work in the Northern Hemisphere?
Yeah, well, that's quite a tough one to answer, to be honest. There may be some element of truth in that, more from the players and the coaches, I think. But I couldn't 100% put hand on heart say, the answer to that is yes. What I can say, though, and the one team that really, well, there are two teams really, but the one team in the UK that really stood out, well, Great Britain and Ireland, because Ireland's not in the UK, was the Irish team when they played the All Blacks. They just looked a different animal to what they'd looked previously, but by doing the sort of things that you've just been talking about. And the interesting background to that one is the fact I know Stuart Lancaster really well, who's coach of Leinster, which is the dominant province in Ireland. And then when they played the All Blacks, I think there were 13 Leinster players in the starting 15. Now, I've worked alongside Stuart for years, sort of partly as a mentor, only because I'm an older man than he is. But we spent a lot of time talking, and he'd sent me some video clips of Leinster training about 4 weeks before Ireland played. And Ireland played against the All Blacks just as Leinster trained. Yeah. It was all games-based stuff. So the forwards needed to have the sort of capabilities that you alluded to. They needed to be able to roam around the field. They needed to be able to attack space. They needed to be able to keep the ball alive. You know, they had really good core skills and good decision-making skills in the game. So I think that's probably where that came from.
Yeah, I was very impressed with Ireland. I've got to say, very impressed. I'm hoping for their sake, they're not peaking, you know, at the wrong time like they always tend to do.
Done it so many times. They've always peaked halfway between World Cups.
Yeah. So I'd love for them to be able to deliver that on the world stage in 2023.
I think I hope. I just wonder in the Northern Hemisphere where there's been a bit of a backlash after the Lions tour of South Africa, because that was some of the worst rugby I've ever seen in my life. And that was awful. In fact, it was non-rugby.
Is it when you say backlash? What do you mean? Do you mean referring to the style they played, or?
Yeah, people think, hang on a minute, if this is the best that British rugby can offer, they're playing like this, and there's something sadly wrong with our game. So whether that's been I'm not privy. I don't go into international environments, so I've no idea what they talk about. But I wouldn't be surprised if there was a little bit of that, thinking, look, we are better than this in the Northern Hemisphere. We can play some more entertaining and effective rugby than we saw the Lions play on the Lions tour, and maybe that's had an impact as well on the way that the Northern Hemisphere sides approach the game. Yeah.
Well, I think had that Irish team that we saw play the All Blacks go to South Africa, and that instead of the Lions, I think that Irish team would have wiped them 3-0.
Well, they certainly played a lot better.
Yeah.
Sure, more entertaining, more effective rugby.
Yeah. No, they're actually a very entertaining team to watch at the moment. Yeah. I want to go back to, you mentioned your Bath days. Yeah. One of your team that you coached was very successful during that time. I want to go to a period where you played a series against Wigan Rugby League.
Right, yeah.
You played, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, you played 2 games, 1 Rugby Union game, 1 Rugby League game.
You did, yeah.
What was that like in preparing for that? Did you take that very seriously, or was it sort of just a bit of a bit of fun before? Was it a pre-season or at the end of the season?
Right, so number one, it was a commercial decision. It had nothing to do with us.
Yeah.
Right. Number 2, it was one of the most exciting moments in my life, because even though I've been born in Leigh, as I mentioned earlier on, my father played rugby league. He played for Wigan.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been a lifelong supporter of Wigan Rugby League Club. And suddenly I was in charge of a team that was going to play against them. And it was right at the end. It was sort of 6 weeks into their season, I think. It was right at the end of our season. And we played the rugby league game on the Tuesday, the Wednesday night, after we'd won the cup final at Twickenham. We had no preparation. We had 1 session delivered by a rugby league coach on the Monday afternoon. We had a number of players who couldn't play on the Wednesday evening, and a number of senior players. So the side was a mix of our senior players, none of whom have ever played league before, and some younger players, none of whom have ever played league before. And so I think we went up there with totally unrealistic expectations, because the Wigan team at that time was unbelievably strong. I mean, Martin of Fire, Twigger Marler, Sean Edwards, those guys in it. Jeez, they would have ripped any sand in the world apart at either coast.
Here goes Jason Robinson, and Bath are trying desperately to bring him down. Eventually they get there, and it was the figure of Jonathan Callard who was in there quickly.
Good tackle also by Mike Catt, he went low.
Ball to Connolly. Connolly drags a Fire back on the inside. A Fire with pace this time to go round the outside and score the first try. No doubts this time. Russell Smith
and we thought, we would be okay if we hang on in there. And we hung on in there for about 45 seconds before a Fire scored his first try. And the floodgates opened. I think they scored 80 points on the night. We scored a consolation try. John Callard, our fullback, who played at standoff, I think, he scored a consolation try at the end, which he maintains as a brilliant try, and I maintain that the defence just let him walk through and score. But so that was that. But what was interesting about that was the game in the Northern Hemisphere was about to go professional. I think it had already gone professional in the Southern Hemisphere. I think you guys got a year ahead of us. And it didn't half open the eyes to our players of what a professional approach might mean rugby, because these guys were supremely fit. Their skill level was way, way above ours in terms of the running, handling, kicking skills, tackling, individual core skills of the game. So we knew, despite the fact that we'd been very dominant over the previous 10 years in the English Rugby Union, there was a big, big gap for us to fill to become what you might call fully professional. So that was a real eye-opener from that point of view. Then, I think it was 10 days later, we played them at Union, at Twickenham. And in the first 5 minutes, I think we were awarded, we either scored a pushover or awarded a penalty try. But it's pretty evident that it was going to be unbelievably dangerous to continue scrimmaging like that. So I just sent a message on the field. I said, just don't scrum. I said, go down in the scrum, but just hold your own. Don't, because physically it could be quite dangerous, because these guys had never scrummaged before. Rugby league scrum was a bit of a joke in many ways.
Controlling at the base of the scrum. This time the Wigan front row doing well though, just to hold it for a while, but they come up now, and was there a foot in the scrum? The referee is going to give a penalty try.
But we actually played some pretty good rugby, because we used to playing with the ball. You know, we were a team that was notorious for playing with the ball as opposed to being set piece based. And it built up a 40-point lead or something like that. Scored a couple of really good tries in the second half. And then suddenly, Wigan had a scrum on their own, well, it's 5 metre line. All the backs were lined up in their in-goal area. And about 20 seconds later, they'd scored between the posts at the other end.
Where did that come flying from? It's taken by a Fire. And the upshot could well be a clear overlap here for Wigan. Bradlinski has seen it. Henry Paul. A Fire. Great chance here. He's got Murdoch with him. And Murdoch is going to go. And Murdoch is going to score. From their own line.
So you don't see that very often at Twickenham. And they scored 2 other tries from way, way inside their own half before the end of the game, because, again, their conditioning levels were so high that they could keep going for 80 minutes. And we sort of faded a little bit in the last 10 minutes. So it was, what was great is, A, that we won. So it was 1-1, but both teams were expected to win their codes anyway. But I think, again, it enforced the importance of conditioning in a professional game. But it also, it sort of, certainly for us, I'm not sure it did for many other union people, but for us, we suddenly realised there is a different way to play this game. You know, and again, going back to the opportunist approach, if you get the chance to play from behind your own line or near close to your own, if you got the skill level, if you're mentally robust enough to go for it, and if, you know, the environment is geared towards that, then, you know, you can play the game differently. So yeah, there were amazing experiences. Forever grateful that we had the opportunity, and yeah, I think Bath and Wigan players made some great friends over the 2 weeks, and players from both clubs are still in contact with one another. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I guess that's where I was going to let, that was leading to the next question. Did you learn anything from them? And obviously, I think you've pretty much answered that in that question. What about coaching rugby league? Have you ever had any opportunities to be involved in rugby league?
Not directly, no. I've been down, I got invited down to Wigan a couple of times, and to watch sessions. And it's, yeah, it's actually, it seems to me pretty systematic. It's 5 tackles and kick. And I do think, I mean, I don't know whether it's the same, because I know Australia, the strongest rugby league side in the world, whether it's different in Australia, how much flexibility and adaptability during the plays leading up to the 5th tackle is allowed. It strikes me in the English game, maybe there's not as much as you would think, given the ability of the players on the field. A lot of it is about territory and completing your sets. And I thought, well, because I remember asking the question at Wigan, I said, is it not about scoring tries as opposed to just completing sets? Oh, well, if we complete enough sets, put enough pressure, we'll score tries eventually.
Yeah.
So
I think that's still the philosophy down here. Yeah. I mean, when you know, you're watching the NRL, one of the main stats that they talk about is their completed sets, and that seems to be one of the key performance indicators for rugby league here as well.
Yeah, and I think it's a less, in some ways, less fluid game, because every time there's a tackle, the game comes to a standstill. So defence can unless you get a very, very quick play of the ball, defences can reset. That element of chaos that you talked about right at the very start, I think there's a bit more of that chaotic element in Union than there is in League. Yeah,
I would say so. And I think I talked to a player from the Melbourne Storm, and he talked about their systems at the Melbourne Storm, and they were they knew exactly what they were going to do in terms of their structure and attack. And they'd studied opposition teams so well, they knew exactly what they were going to do. And he said the only way teams could get the better of them was if they brought out something completely new that they'd never seen before. And in that situation, that was that chaos that they weren't used to, and that was the only way that they could provide an opportunity to score against the Melbourne Storm.
So I think there's a really great, and I think we talked about this a couple of years ago when I met you in Australia, there's a really great coaching message to come out of that. Is one of the main aims of any coach should be to beat the analysts, beat the opposition analysts. You beat the opposition analysts, you're well on your way to beating the opposition team, because it almost means you've got to come up with things that are different.
Yeah, in saying that, if you're trying to come up with something different, is it safe to try and keep things hidden away and bring them out late in a tournament, or is that going to create a lack of cohesion and potentially lead to failure?
Yeah, good question. That my thinking is that if you're going to come up with something different, then you continually come up with something different. You don't hold things back.
Thank you for listening to part 1 of my chat with Brian Ashton. Part 2 of this chat will be out next week. Remember to pass this podcast on to any coaches you feel could learn from Brian's experiences. Catch you again for part 2. In the meantime, keep learning.